Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. We are so close to the NBA regular season starting. Just a few more preseason games left to go, and then we will be in meaningful basketball time, which is very exciting. Sap, before that starts, though, still some things to have to clear up from the off season. We're going to do our previews of the Eastern and Western conferences. But before that, the Golden State Warriors, the defending champions, they have some internal problems going on right now, specifically with Draymond Green. We talked about this the other week. Punched teammate Jordan Poole in the face in practice. Footage of that got leaked online via TMZ, and Draymond Green has stepped away from the team. Now it comes out that he is going to be fined, but not suspended for the punch. But I'm also seeing that a lot of his teammates are not forgiving him, and Jordan Poole hasn't spoken to him still. So we saw the Celtics suspend Ime Udoka for a full year for something that maybe wasn't, directly team related. We don't know all the details, obviously. Now the Warriors are opting not to suspend Draymond Green for something that was very clearly team related. In fact, could be defined as assault. What do you think of the Warriors' decision here?
Well, it's kind of interesting, Chet, because the first reaction by the Golden State Warriors was to worry about how the video got leaked. And once the video got leaked, obviously, everything got heightened to the point where, okay, he stepped away from the team, he got fined, which means absolutely nothing to someone who makes $20 million a year. What are you going to fine him? But not being suspended, he stepped away from the team, he's come back, he's going to be ready to play on opening night on Tuesday. So really no punishment for Draymond Green for cold cocking Jordan Poole. But the Warriors were just concerned about how this video got out. And whoever leaked the video to TMZ got $120,000. Good for them. I think the biggest issue with all of this is Draymond Green being territorial in this situation, because the Warriors have been the Warriors for nearly a decade, and the pecking order has always been Steph, Clay, Draymond. Now, when Durant was there for 3 years, he was kind of an interloper. He was more of a mercenary. Those three guys, Steph, Clay, Draymond, they're brothers. They were all drafted and developed by the Warriors. They built that culture, whereas Durant came in from the outside. He was kind of like not your brother, but your cousin who was spending the summer with you. You knew he was going to go home in early September, go back to where he was from. And you knew that it wasn't going to last long with Kevin Durant. But I think right now, when we saw in the finals that Jordan Poole had a good finals against the Celtics, Andrew Wiggins was probably the Warriors' second best player. Now, Wiggins wasn't involved in this kerfuffle, but I think a lot of this has to do with money. Draymond has 2 years left on his contract. Jordan Poole is a restricted free agent after this year, and Andrew Wiggins is an unrestricted free agent after this year. Draymond's looking for that last final big contract. I think he's getting territorial, worrying, am I still the number 3 guy in the pecking order? Is Jordan Poole moving up the ranks? Is Andrew Wiggins, who played better than me in the finals, moving up the ranks? Are those guys going to re-sign? The Warriors have a bottomless pit of money. We get that, but, there's only so much that can go around. I think that has a lot to do with it. I'm also going to go into conspiracy theory mode here. And some reports are that Jordan Poole was feeling really good about himself, that, he was being a bit too cocky and arrogant, which, again, he's in the NBA. Most NBA players are cocky and arrogant. Did somebody put Draymond Green up to doing this? I don't want to go all the way up to
like
Steve
that.
Kerr.
Good conspiracy theory.
Or Bob Myers, or someone said Draymond straightened him out. I mean, Draymond's the bully, right? He's the bouncer in the club. This is what he does. I mean, he's not a skilled player anymore, but he does what he's supposed to do. It's almost like set him straight, get him back in with the rest of us. Who knows? Because he should have been suspended for this, or at least not the full season. That's obviously crazy, but 4 or 5 games. He assaulted a teammate. That's something that you can't have. That's where my crazy mind goes, is maybe the Warriors are like, Draymond, take care of this. Take care of Jordan Poole. Make sure he's back in line. Who knows?
I think that, conspiracy theories are great and I enjoy them. And it's certainly, not out of the realm of possibility. But I kind of just think Draymond's an a-hole.
He's an definitely that. He's definitely
you want to have on your team. And I think, as much of a tough guy as he very well may be, I also think he's a little bit sensitive too, and
Mhm.
and reacts very emotionally. We've seen this in games and practices before. We've seen it with his coach Steve Kerr, and it's not, if you were going to say, "Hey, an NBA player punched his teammate," who's your guess? Most people's first guess would probably be Draymond Green would be the guy who did it, and so that doesn't come as a huge surprise. My bigger issue and my surprise really is that I think this just sets such a bad example, that the Warriors aren't suspending him, and that they're just like, basically, if I'm Jordan Poole, I feel like the team doesn't have my back at all. And I'm really upset by this. I mean, I don't understand how something like this doesn't warrant a suspension. Then what does warrant a suspension? We talked about the Celtics maybe overreacting with Ime Udoka. Again, we don't know all the facts. We know all the facts here. To me, this seems like a massive underreaction. I'm not saying suspend him for half the season. I'm saying, at least something. 2
Yeah.
games, 5 games, something.
So he's going to be there on opening night when the Warriors receive their rings for winning their title, right? So, and I'm sure the fans will go crazy because Draymond's a fan favorite because
Right.
he's their Marcus Smart, or I should say Marcus Smart is the Celtics version of Draymond Green. And I think Draymond Green is a better player, more effective at what he does. But you get my drift there, that they're similar type guys. And yeah, when his name is announced, he'll get a huge standing ovation. How's Jordan Poole going to feel when that happens? Maybe Jordan Poole will get a huge standing ovation. And, at that point, everybody will be totally confused. I guess you can love both of these guys,
Yeah.
despite whatever happened. And I still think this all goes back to money. Draymond's looking for that last big contract. Poole's looking for money. Andrew Wiggins is looking for money. I think that Draymond Green, who I think is very sensitive, like you said, maybe insecure at some point, is just like, well, I still am the third guy, right? Right. Meanwhile,
Yeah.
2 more kids have come into the fray. And now you could look at it that Draymond maybe has middle child syndrome, right? Because Steph and Clay, they run the Golden State Warriors. No one's going to get in their way. But now you've got Jordan Poole and Andrew Wiggins, who are legit players and young guys. And here's Draymond kind of in the middle going, hey, what about me? So I think that that's kind of a natural reaction he had. It's not natural to go up and cold cock your teammate. That's not supposed to happen. I know Steve Kerr rambled on for felt like 20 minutes explaining why the Warriors came up with this decision not to suspend him. And I'm getting the feeling that, the decision was made by Steph Curry or Klay Thompson or both, right? I would think, and I'm assuming Klay and Steph are always, in the same, they're always in line together. I those guys, I don't think are going to disagree on anything. So, and I think Steph's obviously the leader of that team. Maybe Steve Kerr, general manager Bob Myers, whatever, talked to Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, maybe a few of the other leaders, and said, what should we do here? And they said, well, he's Draymond Green. He's still a big part of our team. Fine him, don't suspend him. But I'm surprised the league hasn't stepped in. But, we saw this in exhibition football when Aaron Donald was waving 2 helmets in a scrimmage against the Cincinnati Bengals. He didn't hit anybody, but still the force was there with a guy who's bigger, stronger, and tougher than Draymond Green. I would rather take on Draymond Green than Aaron Donald at some point in the fight. But he got fined, not suspended. And again, sometimes this is the level of player you are. I mean, if Jordan Poole went up to Draymond Green and cold cocked him, I would assume Jordan Poole would have not only been fined, he would have been suspended as well, because in the pecking order, he's not as high as Draymond Green.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm Jordan Poole. I'm pissed today. I'm
Sure.
saying, well, this team does not support me or have my back. Like, I'm reading all these reports. I saw like Kevon Looney was saying, Draymond has to earn our trust back. All these reports saying that Jordan Poole hasn't forgiven him and hasn't spoken to him since. And so, I think this makes it worse. He got away with punching his teammate with impunity. What's a fine? Draymond Green's made a lot of money. I know he wants to have another big contract. He very well may get it, but at this point in his career, what's a fine to Draymond Green? I mean, that's nothing. That's the ultimate slap on the wrist. So I could see this really pissing off Jordan Poole and maybe some of the players who haven't gotten their big paydays or don't feel like they're, eye on the pecking order in the Warriors organization. I saw Steve Kerr said it's the biggest crisis that he's had since he's been coaching the team. And so if that's the case, that doesn't warrant a suspension. I just don't understand the logic there.
How many crises has he faced, though? I mean, come on, Steve Kerr. You've been there 8 years. You've gone to the final 6 times. I could have coached the Warriors for the last 8 years and probably had the same success. Heck, Luke Walton had a better winning percentage when he took over for half a season. Steve Kerr at some point, is a blowhard. I mean, and I liked him as a player. I like how he speaks out when it comes to social issues. I really do. But there's a guy who takes himself way too seriously, right? So, yeah, there's not been many crises with the Golden State Warriors the last 8 years. You've got a great player in Steph Curry, who, along with LeBron James, is the best leader in the sport with less drama, right? There's really not a lot of drama with Steph, and Clay just kind of goes along with him. And Kevin Durant decided to go there, and you won two
Right.
championships in 3 years. You kind of tanked and ended up adding some really nice pieces in Wiseman and Kuminga. You got a good deal in Andrew Wiggins. I mean, not a lot of crises for Steve Kerr. So again, he has a tendency of being a blowhard. I get all that. But you know what's interesting, Jet? You look at the last 4 teams that made the NBA Finals. 3 are dealing with a lot of issues off the court, right? You got Draymond, Jordan Poole going on in Golden State. You got Ime Udoka suspended by the Celtics. Probably will never coach again in Boston. I'd be shocked if he did. And then the finals the year before was Milwaukee, which is in good shape right now because they're kind of just sailing along. Phoenix has to deal with the fact that they're going to be selling their team because their owner is insane and a racist. And, by the way, their starting center doesn't really talk to the head coach. So 3 of the 4 teams that made it to the finals last 2 years are kind of in disarray at this point. But I think they can all recover because in the end, talent generally wins out in the NBA.
Yeah, it definitely does. It's a player-based league. It's a talent-based league for sure. I just, I look at the overall messaging that the Warriors are sending here, and I just don't like it. It probably is not going to affect them. I just think, again, that if you're going to punch somebody in the face undefended, like, he wasn't ready for the punch, then you should have to have a bigger consequence than getting fined. That's just my overall point. I think
absolutely.
It just sends a really terrible message. And, we'll see what the Warriors decide to do with their contract extensions and stuff. And Jordan Poole, I presume, would be a player that a lot of teams do want. And maybe he doesn't want to be with the Warriors anymore after this. So I don't know how it's going to play out. I'm sure the Warriors will still be excellent this season, as we're going to talk about in a minute with our power rankings. But I think that this was not handled in a smart way by the organization. It's certainly not the way I would have handled it. I would say, Draymond, you've had incidents before. This is another incident. This is not okay. You're suspended for, opening night or the first 2 or 3 games. It doesn't have to be a big suspension, like I said, but something symbolic, at least, to say in this organization, you cannot punch your teammate in the face, period.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not a good look for the Warriors, who are supposed to be the model franchise. But again, when something like this happens, it just kind of lends itself to why they're popular in a sense because they play a beautiful game of basketball and they've been successful. But a lot of people don't like them as well because they do have this holier than thou attitude. And I think it starts with Steve Kerr, really does. And Steph Curry, who is a likable superstar, but can also be unlikable in a sense that he also seems like he thinks his shit is ice cream, right?
Yeah.
So, you kind of get that little pushback on the Warriors that they're almost too good to be true. And, that's why I know I was certainly rooting for the Celtics in the NBA Finals. And I'm not a big Celtics fan, but I wanted to see them win because, first of all, I've spent the last 3.5 months, dealing with people telling me that Steph Curry's better than LeBron James. And, I don't get into it all that much, but there are some out there that need to be told a lesson at some point. And that's what I'm here for, Jet.
Fair enough. But yeah, again, I don't think they handle it the correct way. But like you said, Sap, a minute ago, it's a player-driven league. They have an incredible amount of talent on their team, guys we haven't even talked about yet. That they have just an incredible amount of depth. So they should be right in the mix for contending for a championship again this season, regardless of what they decide to do with Draymond Green. And we'll see if that has an impact on them at all. So on that note, Sap, that moves us to our Western Conference preview. We talked about this a little bit the other day, but it was a little bit truncated, so we wanted to expand a little bit further on it. Sap, so where would you like to start with the West?
Yeah, let's look at the West. And again, I think, as is going to be the case this year, you're going to have maybe a third of the league tanking for the top 2 players coming out in the draft.
Right.
I mean, there's no question about that. So you probably have 5 teams in the West that are in total tank mode. I would say Utah, San Antonio, Oklahoma City, Sacramento, maybe Houston. I think Houston has some talent, but they're probably all in a tank mode. So that leaves 10 other teams. So it's almost like not worth discussing the bottom 5 teams in the Western Conference. So, that leaves us with 10 teams that will get into the play-in tournament and then go from there. But yeah, I would think that those 5 teams I mentioned, they're all in tank mode for the 2 players that are going to go first and second in the upcoming draft.
Yeah, we're going to see a lot of teams, especially around the trade deadline, I think selling, really trying to bottom out. So especially if a team gets off to a slow start, it's hard to predict who's going to get off to a slow start, who's going to get off to a fast start. But yes, certainly this seems like it's a draft where teams are specifically looking and saying, one of these 2 guys, Wembanyama from France or Scoot Henderson, who's in the G League Ignite team, could alter the trajectory of our franchise for the next, 10, 15 years potentially. So, when those types of drafts happen, you see a lot of teams bottoming out. And so I think that in terms of talking about the West versus the East, and we're going to talk about the East on a later podcast, I think that the East is deeper, but the top of the West might be a little bit better. It's close. I think the 2 conferences are relatively evenly matched, but I think the West might be a little bit more top heavy, Sap.
Yeah, it could be, because you got the defending champion Warriors. You got the Nuggets, who I love this year, especially if Jamal Murray remains healthy, and Michael Porter Jr., I think, is one of the most important players in this league. If he's healthy and engaged, games where he plays at his highest level, Michael Porter Jr., he's Jason Tatum. The problem with him is, as high as his ceiling is, his floor is very low. He also has games where he doesn't show up. That's how big a factor he can be. The Clippers with Kawhi Leonard coming back. I think the Lakers look good in the preseason because Anthony Davis is really engaged. And if you got Anthony Davis and LeBron playing 65 games each, I think they're going to be a factor. Dallas has the favorite to win the MVP and Luka Doncic. Memphis had a great year last year. I think the Suns are going to dip a little bit because of their internal problems. Plus, they can't really top what they did last year. But yeah, the West maybe is more powerful at the top than towards the middle. The thing that I keep looking at is that you got a team like New Orleans, which I think is going to be a factor this year. When we did our power rankings a week ago, I had them at number 9. And then you look over in the Eastern Conference, I think I have it. We're going to talk about that in a future podcast, but I have like Atlanta at number 9. Those are 2 really good teams to be at number 9. Number 9 means they're going to be in the play-in tournament, can get bounced immediately. Those are really good teams. I've never seen the league this deep. I think there's 20 teams that look to make the playoffs and maybe make a run in the playoffs. I'm not saying there's 20 teams in the league that have a chance to win a championship, but there's more than normal the amount of teams that I think have championship aspirations. And in the West, Golden State, Denver, the Clippers, I think the Lakers have title aspirations simply because, they're older. So they have to be there. And, if Dallas can add another piece, they could be in contention as well. They did make the conference finals a year ago. So I don't recall the sport ever being this deep, and that's going to make it quite intriguing this year, rather than, okay, Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors are going to represent the West, and wherever LeBron's playing, he's going to represent the East. Those days are over, I believe.
Yeah, and then we've seen this the past couple of years now, where it seems like there's a lot more parity in the league, and that's obviously great for the sport, great for fans. You want to see that. You don't want it to be just an invitational, or the Harlem Globetrotters to be dominating everybody. And I think yes, the Warriors have won a bunch of titles over the past decade, and last year obviously they won again. But I think if not for the Celtics' inexperience and some sort of mistakes they made, being that young team, like you talked about, Sap, you could be talking about the Celtics being the champions and not the Warriors. So it was close. It was, the Warriors ended up winning in 6, and it could have very well been 7. The Celtics could have won. The Celtics could have won it in 5 had they not made a ton of mistakes. It was a close finals, and it would have been closer. Obviously I'm a Celtics fan, so I'm saying this now. Had the Celtics not just continuously repeated the same mistakes over and over again, and the Warriors' experience was I think the ultimate trump card in that finals. So yes, you certainly have them looming, but as you said, Sep, I totally agree with you. I think there's a lot of teams that consider themselves legitimate championship contenders. I know you're much higher on the Lakers than the average person is because you're a LeBron guy and you gotta maintain hope in the before the season begins and everybody goes down with injuries on that team. But yeah, I think that in the West, Sap, if I'm looking at teams that I think can legitimately win a championship, I look at the Warriors. Obviously, the defending champions, so you got to say yes, they can legitimately win a championship. They just did it, and I think they're going to be actually better. They should be better this year, unless the Draymond thing just unravels the whole team. I don't think that'll happen, but I think with the emergence of their younger players, Moody, Kuminga, Wiseman, and Poole and Wiggins, playing for contracts too, I think they should be even better than they were in terms of just the overall talent. The Clippers, we know Kawhi's pedigree. Paul George is obviously a fantastic player, and they have a really good rest of the roster. They added Norman Powell at the trade deadline last year, which I think was a sneaky, really good move for them. They're a very good team, and they can absolutely win a championship with that pair of Kawhi and Paul George. The Nuggets you talked about, Zap, both of us love that Nuggets team. Nikola Jokic, obviously the two-time MVP, the reigning MVP of the league, so we know what he's about. They're adding back Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray to the team this year, so they should be a force to be reckoned with. In addition to Bones Highland, their outstanding rookie last year, should be better. So that's a really good team too. So I look at those three teams and say, yep, no doubt they can absolutely compete for and win a championship. And then you have to look at, like you said, the other teams like the Dallas Mavericks, who are in the conference finals and have arguably the best player in the league in Luka Doncic. You have to look at the Memphis Grizzlies, who had the second best record in the league last year and have one of the best young players in the league in John Morant. And, are they going to improve on what they did last year? So I look at that as sort of the next tier down, the Grizzlies and the Mavericks. The Warriors, Clippers, and Nuggets, I think for sure are serious title contenders. And then, yes, sure, you could throw the Lakers in there, Sap, if you want to. I'm not going to do it, but if you want to, go ahead.
Well, and you also got the Timberwolves and Pelicans. I mean, Zion's back. Look, if Zion can give you 65, 70 games, they'll be a factor with Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum.
I think they'll be good, but I don't
team.
think they're ready to compete for a title yet. But I think they'll be very good. Yeah, sure. Zion, if he's healthy for the whole year, we saw what he was in his one full year of health, and he's a dominant player.
And the Timberwolves were really good last year. They've added Rudy Gobert. I don't know what that's going to add. I'm not a big Gobert fan, but he's an impact player supposedly on the defensive end,
right?
No, it shouldn't, because Karl Anthony Towns is more comfortable playing away from the basket anyway, and Anthony Edwards is only going to get better. He's a force. And you mentioned Memphis. I'm not as high on them this year as what they did last year, but they did have the second best record in basketball behind Phoenix. And look, you can go back to that series against Golden State. They had home court advantage against Golden State in round 2, and they lost in 6 games, and John Morant missed half the series. Desmond Bane missed several games. He wasn't quite himself. He was playing injured. They had suspensions as well. I mean, that series could have flipped very easily. So, yeah, the West is that deep. So you want to do it where you just get down to our Final Four for the conference and then kind of play it out from there?
Yeah. I mean, I think, Sap, you for me, like I said, the three no doubters to me are the Warriors, Clippers, and Nuggets, barring injury, of course. You can't account for, and especially when we're talking about the Clippers and Kawhi Leonard, you got to account for that. But those three, and then the fourth, I'm gonna say the Mavericks, because of just how good I think Luka Doncic is, and I see the shape he's gotten himself into with playing Eurobasket this year.
Mm-hmm.
And he got off to a slow start last year. They got off to a slow start because he looked like he was out of shape. I don't think that's going to be an issue this year. So I think that they will be the Final Four teams. Though I can't fully discount what the Grizzlies did last year. It did seem like they played above their head, and I don't think they improved. I don't think the Mavericks improved much either, but I think Luka Doncic is a superior player to John Morant.
Oh, without question. I mean, John Morant's fascinating to watch, but Luka impacts the game more. He's actually a better passer, much more efficient scorer, tremendous on the boards. Neither one is really a defensive demon. I would say Luka's the better player than John Morant. He's also 5-6 inches taller. Size does matter. So, yeah, I mean, Dallas is going to be intriguing to watch. The team we haven't really even talked about is Phoenix, which won 64 games last year, and they got blown out in Game 7 against the Mavericks in the second round. Now, just think about how history could have changed if Phoenix had won that series, because I think Phoenix matches up really well against Golden State, because they had tremendous perimeter defenders, which is what you need to combat Golden State. Maybe Phoenix beats Golden State, and it's a Phoenix Celtic final, and Lord knows what happens there. So again, that championship by Golden State, again, it's a championship. You can never take it away from them, but it wasn't like it was in 2017 where they lost one game in the postseason. And as soon as the postseason started, you're like, okay, the Warriors are going to win this thing. Like, how many games are they going to lose in the next 2 months? And it happened to be one game. So it's a little bit different now. It's that much closer. So I think I agree with you on 3 of the final 4, the Warriors, Clippers, Nuggets. I'm going to say the Lakers crashed the party.
I know you are.
Well, the thing is, in basketball, this can happen. I mean, Golden State, the year before last year, was in total tank mode. They were terrible, and they got off to a fast start because they seemed to be healthier. But they didn't even have Klay Thompson until mid-season, and then they were rolling early. A lot of those young guys like Jordan Poole stepped up, Kuminga. Wiseman didn't even play last year, which is damn scary that, you put him into the lineup. How much better is Golden State going to be? But I think Anthony Davis is really focused this year. And look, it almost sounds like a guy who keeps going on a crash diet every month. Like, I'm going to start on Monday. I'm going to eat better and exercise. And then like 6 days later, he's back to eating pizza and Twinkies and laying on his couch. It's the same message with Anthony Davis that, okay, this is going to be the year where he's focused, in great shape. He's going to play 70 games and he's going to be an MVP candidate. If that's the case, then the Lakers certainly will be feared because LeBron is still one of the 5 or 6 best players in the world. And I think a key component for them is going to be Kendrick Nunn, who didn't play last year. He can legitimately score, good 3-point shooter. That type of player can help them quite a bit. So yeah, I'm going to put the Lakers into the Final Four along with the Warriors, Nuggets, and Clippers.
I think it's just optimistic sap trying to be excited about his guy LeBron, and that I think you're just projecting your hopes on what the actual thing is going to. In terms of the Lakers, and we're going to talk about them a lot over the course of the season because they're the Lakers and they have the most famous popular athlete on the planet and LeBron James. So it's always going to be something to talk about with them. I don't understand the roster construction at all. It doesn't make any sense to me. They have so many point guards. None of them are really great shooters. I know Patrick Beverley thinks he's a great shooter. And Russell Westbrook, I heard saying he's a great shooter, but that doesn't make it true. Now Patrick Beverley's doing a podcast too, for Barstool Sports. So that's going on in the middle of the season too. He's going to keep doing that.
Everybody's doing that in the NBA. I mean, I know, but I would.
It's like if the goal is, for the new guy coming in, do you really want him doing a podcast, Sap?
I don't mind that stuff.
Okay, but they don't have really any wings. Like, I don't know who's going to spell LeBron because he can't play 35 minutes every game, Sap. That's just not a reasonable ask.
That's an issue. Unless they go out and add someone. Are they going to go to Cleveland and add Kevin Love? And what exactly does he have left? That's a big thing. And again, no one has told the Lakers that the league is now built around wings. Right, 3-and-D guys, and they don't have many of those guys. Like you said, they have a bevy of point guards, whether it be Westbrook, Beverley, Dennis Schroeder. Then you got Anthony Davis, who again I think is primed for a great year. But yeah, they need some help there, and maybe they'll add some pieces. They're going to try to recreate the way the sport's played now, and zig when everybody else is zagging. I mean, it's not football, and even then you can't pull that stuff off. You still need to throw the football and have an explosive offense to be a contender in the NFL. To be a contender in the NBA, you've got to shoot the 3, you got to defend the 3. Those are the 2 main things, right? And that's why Golden State, the Celtics, Dallas, and Miami were the Final Four because they were the 4 best teams at doing those 2 things. The league is all built around making 3s and defending 3s, and the Lakers weren't good at either. I get it. I maybe have too much faith in LeBron James, but I also think that Anthony Davis, he's the ultimate X factor. I know I mentioned Michael Porter Jr. being a big X factor because if he's playing 65, 70 games and is engaged, Denver has a legitimate big 3, right? With Jokic, Murray, and Porter Jr. And that's a really good big 3, and it's also a big 3 that kind of covers a lot of things. You got the big, you've got the small, and you've got the wing, which is something you always want. It's almost like constructing a chicken. You want to have 3 different parts, and it really works that way. But I also think that Dallas needs help for Luka without question. Phoenix and Memphis, I think they take a step back. They had great years last year. I don't think they're overwhelmingly talented, which means the next year they may step back a little bit. And some of those other teams we talked about, whether it's New Orleans or Minnesota, I mean, if the Lakers are playing those teams in a series, I think they can beat them and get to the second round and then go from there. So I'll go Lakers, Warriors, Nuggets, Clippers as my final four.
Yeah, I just don't think Phoenix. I think you and I both agree on this. Like you can't. It's so much to overcome when there's so much internal strife. You have all the huge distraction about Sarver and selling the team. Chris Paul is getting older. They sort of denied anything bad happened in that game 7 to Dallas. They asked, Monty Williams and the players, did you guys learn anything from that game? No. We're sort of just going to go about doing it. We know Monty Williams and DeAndre Ayton have a combative relationship, and that Ayton didn't want to be there. He wanted to be in Indiana. They matched the offer sheet, so he's there. They didn't want to pay him in the first place. So I just don't know how you can overcome all that internal strife. And last year we thought they were going to take a step back, Sap. They did not in the regular season, but in the postseason they certainly did, and they were a massive disappointment. And that's, unfortunately for Chris Paul, been, the thing that's dogged him the most in his career is his postseason disappointments. And he certainly did not live up to the billing in that second round series against the Mavericks. And he's only getting older. And, we're amazed by what he can do and what LeBron James can do and stuff like that. But you have to be realistic about what guys are capable of when they've logged so many minutes and played so many games over the course of their career. And at some point, Chris Paul is not a big guy. At some point, it's going to catch up to him, and it has often in the postseason. So I'm just not optimistic about what the Suns can do.
Yeah, and some teams can still flourish with a lot of internal strife, but there's not many of them in this league that can do that, because I don't think the players are built the same way as they were, say, 25, 30 years ago. Jordan's Bulls had a lot of internal strife. Like, they hated the general manager, Jerry Krause. Jordan was punching Steve Kerr. Dennis Rodman was, leaving the team for periods of time. Scottie Pippen was the 7th highest paid guy on his own team,
right,
while he was probably the second best player in the league. Jordan was always angry, played with a chip on his shoulder, but that kind of fueled them. And again, they were so good, it didn't matter. You can kind of fight through that. The bad boy Pistons played with a lot of anger internally and externally, and it fueled them to win championships. I don't think the teams are built that way right now, right? I mean, I just don't think that works. So I think that's going to hinder Phoenix. I can see them slipping. I think they'll make the playoffs. They're still too good not to. You get Devin Booker, who's phenomenal, and Chris Paul could still play, and Ayton's probably going to try to play to get the hell out of Phoenix. I still think there's a potential Ayton going to Brooklyn for Kevin Durant and what other pieces you need to make it happen. That could happen in midseason because Durant doesn't look all that happy in Brooklyn. But yeah, I'm not very high on Phoenix, but again, I think that they'll slip. Memphis, I'm still trying to figure out how Memphis pulled this all off last year. They even played better without Ja Morant. They were like 22-5 in games without Ja Morant. That makes no sense. I think they'll kind of bounce back. Well, they are well constructed, and they play defense, right? That's the big thing. When you play defense like that, you're kind of in every game, and you don't have long losing streaks. But I think they'll come back a little bit. So, yeah,
the talent's not there in terms of overall roster.
No, it's not high-end talent. No. Other than Ja Morant, they got Ja Morant and a lot of role players.
Sap, last thing before we finish up. And we're going to do this in the East too. Which team is most likely to end up with Victor Wembanyama in the Western Conference? Because we're going to be talking about him all year, and Scoot Henderson. But let's just, assuming Wembanyama is going to be the number 1 pick of the draft, which team in the West is the most likely destination for him?
San Antonio.
They're the worst team.
They have a little bit of luck too with that. They won the draft lottery back in 1997.
I can't imagine a more perfect place for him to go. By the way,
Lord, yeah, it'd be perfect. Then it would keep Pop active for the next 4 or 5 years till he's almost 80. So yeah, I mean, it would almost be like giving Bill Belichick Trevor Lawrence, right? From the draft a couple of years ago, and that would obviously reinvigorate the old coach. So I would say San Antonio makes the most sense to pick. But again, it comes down to the draft lottery, which is always interesting. So when we get to the Final Four, and we have 3 that we agree on, who meets in the Western Conference Finals and who represents the West?
I think the Warriors will play the Clippers in the Western Conference Finals, and I think the Warriors will advance back to the finals.
Okay. I've got the Lakers beating the Warriors in the semifinals, and I see you shaking your head, but that's okay. This would be like winning a half a championship if LeBron eliminates Golden State, even in the second round, just so I could see Steph Curry cry and Steve Kerr, Clay, say that this is the biggest crisis we've ever faced, or at least since training camp when Draymond Green punched Jordan Poole. I've got the Nuggets beating the Clippers in the other semifinals. And believe it or not, I got the Nuggets beating the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals. I got the Nuggets going to the finals.
Maybe they will, but Sap, this is what I'm going to say. If that happens, the Nuggets play the Lakers in the conference finals, you will switch your pick. If we're sitting here in May, and that's what it is, you're not going to stick with your pick from the preseason.
No,
go, and all this. Oh, the Lakers for sure. You'll take them.
I'll gladly lose all this money that I've invested in the Nuggets winning the championship at 22-1.
There you go.
I'm just going with the owner, right? Stan Kroenke owns the Rams. They won the Super Bowl last year. He owns the Avalanche. They won the Stanley Cup. So it's time for poor old Stan to win a championship in the NBA. I'm not sure if he's aware he owns the Denver Nuggets. He's got so many holdings. But, I've got the Nuggets going to the finals. Again, Michael Porter Jr. to me is one of the biggest X factors in the league, which is kind of scary to say that because he's missed a lot of time. There's games where he looks like he's really not engaged. But if he ever grows up and is healthy, that kid could be a superstar. And you put him along with Jamal Murray, who we know is a great player, and of course the two-time defending MVP in Nikola Jokic, who, by the way, Giannis won back-to-back MVPs and then won a championship the next year when he wasn't the MVP. I think that could happen with Nikola Jokic.
There you go. Maybe we'll see that sort of similarity happen. But that's our Western Conference preview. And make sure you check out our Eastern Conference preview that's coming out later in the week. We will be posting that, talking about all teams in the East, who we think is going to represent the East, and doing all of our predictions of MVP and all that good stuff. So you're not going to want to miss that. Make sure you check out our social medias for the latest updates on the podcast at JohnSapp25, at Jet Stryer. Again, we're the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sapp. Full press coverage. Thanks to them for presenting this. It's on the website. Go check out their website for other great stuff like that. And we will talk to you later about our Eastern Conference and NBA awards previews. See you, everybody.